Alright everyone, this is kind of how we started out with in class. Asked you to go out and get these assets and build this small scene. I've got my hierarchy here open so you can always just pause and see what's placed where. I've got the image target for the skeleton. Inside there I have scaled down and put the skeleton in place. I also have a little cylinder. That's his platform. I went ahead and put a point light in front of that character. There is the skeleton UI that has the name and the health text, and then the images that are use sprites to show the different visuals, and those are on Moodle to download those graphics. There is the image target for the hero, the sword and shield warrior, which is, again, is linked in Moodle, platform which he stands on, the light, the UI, name, health, and then his potions as well. Still have a directional light in the scene, and of course my AR camera. So we started in by adding in. We wanted to hit play, and when we hit play we noticed that the sword character was already doing his animations. The skeleton animation, or the skeleton, didn't have any animations going, but the sword character played through and played all of his animations and even went into his death scene and fell down, and we went ahead and fixed that first. And we did that two different ways. When you click on the sword and shield warrior, you'll see he has an animator controller. Two different ways these animations were made. He has his animator controller already set up. The skeleton does not have an animator controller. His animations are brought in a naming convention: at attack, damage, death, so on, and that's the way Unity knows to load those up as separate clips. So what we want to do is, I'm going to select the sword and shield warrior, double click, open up his controller, kind of zoom out, and you can see all of his animations are there. The only ones we're really going to use is this idle, this normal attack 1, this get hit, and this die. So we went in and we selected these and deleted them, and on the Mac I'm using Command Delete. We're just breaking the transitions between these animations so that one does not stop and the other one start. So here's our idle. That's what we want. I'm going to select it. I'm going to come over here in the inspector and rename that to just idle. We're going to use idle, attack, damage, and death as our animation names for both characters. So there's my sword. Call that attack. There's my damage. It's get hit, sword, shield. I want to make sure that I title that damage. And then the die, we're going to call that death. Now, the idle by default is set up to be the entry animation. It has this orange connector, and if I were to delete that, or if I were to set another one of these, such as attack, if I right click and I go set as default layer, you'll see that it is now the default animation. So select my idle, right click, set as default layer state. Now that's the default animation. These three we're going to call through code, but I do need to make a transition and link the attack back to the idle. So once he's hit, he goes back to his idle state. And once he's been damaged, he goes back to the idle state. And then the death is going to stay out here on its own. Once it plays, we're going to use code to signal the game over. So that gets our animations for our swordsman set up. So if we test that now, he just idles, and you can see that that goes through and that loops by default. So now For our skeleton, what we're going to need to do, the skeleton does not have an animator controller. So in my folder, I'm going to right click, create animator controller. So I'm going to call it skeleton. And then I'm going to select the skeleton in the hierarchy and put that controller in place. Now when I double click it, you'll see it's completely empty. There's nothing in here. No entry state, no animations. But I can bring in the attack, just left click and drag, the damage, the death, and you'll see by bringing in that attack animation it made it the default. Well, here's the skeleton's idle. I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to right click it, we'll select it and right click it and set it as the default. So the idle for the skeleton is the default. I'm going to right click, make a transition to the idle from the attack, right click and make a transition from the damage to the attack. And now the skeleton is set up almost like our swordsman. If I hit play, you'll see there's his idle, and at some point he just stops and gets stuck there, and you'll notice in the animator it shows it stops as well. So over here, if I find my idle, I can scroll down. I've got under my animation tab, you may be under model or rig or materials, but you need to be under animation, and select loop time. And now when we play, you'll see that this plays. Have to apply it. And get my camera to see it. There he is. And now you'll notice that once it gets to the end, it loops back and he continues his idle animation, which is what we want. So we've got that set up with both characters are idling. Now next in our scene for both of these characters, we created another UI. And we made that a world space canvas. And I'm just going to bring this down to 300, 100. There it is. Bring its position down to 0, 0. And you see that's still really big. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this down, hit R. And I just want to be this about as wide as the card. And this will I'll make this the attack for my skeleton. Go ahead and give it a name so I know what it is. I'm also going to go ahead and put in a button, UI button. And then you can see I need to rotate that around the Y 180 degrees. Zero that out, and then I can make the width . And then on my text, of course, undo the overflow. You can make the size. And then this canvas, we need to go ahead and rotate it to where it's flat on the ground. And then I'm going to make that a child of the skeleton image target. And I'll hit play just to make sure that it shows up. And there it is. And then I can take that, I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move it into the hero. And this will be my attack for the hero. And then my button text will need to change as well. And then I will need to take that canvas, of course, and move it over to where it needs to be for the hero. And he's got his button in place as well. So we've got both of the buttons in place for our objects. And now we're going to start on the code for those objects to get those characters to attack. Alright, we're going to start by adding that the script. I'm going to select my folder, right click, create a C# script. I'm just going to call this object script. And then I'm going to double click, and for me it's going to open up Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code. We're going to use a lot of text elements, so I'm going to need to insert the using Unity Engine UI. And then we'll go through and put in all these variables. We're going to link to the object's animator. That's what's playing the animations currently. We're going to need to link to that text file or that text object out that's holding the value of the health. We're going to set the value of this object's health to 100. We've also brought in multiple audio clips. I went into Audacity and created 5 sword sounds and 5 injury sounds, so we will link to those. We also have an audio clip for the drinking of the potion to get health back. We are also going to link each of the 2 characters in the scene, the hero and the skeleton, will link to one another's script. In class we did this as well. We went ahead and put in the variable for the game manager script. The game manager does not exist yet. You can see it's got the red squigglies, so we're going to comment that out for now. And then when we get closer to the end and we're working with our game manager script, we'll have a player number to know whose turn it is. We'll also know about the attack button that's out there on the screen. It says skeleton attack or hero attack. We'll have one more audio clip for the death sound, and that will be the man or the monster. And then our last variables are game objects that will be used to link to our potion images out there on the screen. So you'll need to go through, and again at any time pause the video and make sure you get all of these variables in place and ready to go. And once you do, you can save the file and go back to Unity, and remember this is going on both the skeleton and the sword and shield warrior. So I'm going to apply it to the skeleton, and I will apply it to the sword and shield warrior. And then we will see the variables that we need to link up. The myAm is the actual object itself. It's got the animator on it. The text comes from the skeleton UI, the health. Health will start out at 100. Now in your audio folder you get from Moodle, you should have all the files you need. There'll be the 4 or the 5 sword sounds, sword 1 through 5. And then you should have injured sounds 1 through 5. Again, it'll just be used to draw random sounds to kind of break the game up a bit. Then there's a potion. Now the other script, I'll take this, since I'm on the skeleton, I will take the warrior and drag him in there. In the numbering sequence, we're going to make the hero will be 0, the skeleton will be 1. So since this is a skeleton, his player number is going to be 1. His attack button comes from the canvas attack. For him, the death sound is the monster. And then in his UI, he's got 3 different potions that we will use to set active, true or false, whether or not we want them to show up. Do the same thing for the warrior. He's got an animator on him. His health text needs to link up. We'll use the same 5 audio clips. And the same for the injured too. Use that same potion. Now the skeleton will need to be put into the other script slot for the hero. His player number is 0, so that works. His attack button is in his attack canvas. He has the man for the death, and then he has his 3 potions as well. Now we'll go and we'll start to do a little bit of programming. We will do our, we'll open up our script. And we'll create a new method. Our character will attack, and this is going to start a sequence of events that we built up in class. So we make this public so it's available, it's not going to return anything, and we're just calling this object attack. not taking in any parameters. And we started off by playing the attack animation. So now if we test it out, we'll see the hero. Oh, I've got to hook that up. Didn't hook my buttons up yet. So my hero needs an event trigger on that button. I need to add a new event type for pointer down. I need to make it so there's an object to attach. That's going to be my sword and shield warrior. And from his object script, we should have object attack. We'll do the same thing for the skeleton for his attack button. He will need an event trigger. That will need to be pointer down. We will add the skeleton as the object. And the same thing for his object attack. And now we've got our hero attacking. And we have our skeleton attacking as well. Now we also need to go in and we need to make it so that when we put the sound on there, and I'm going to open up my script again. And in object attack, we went in and I'm going to move this code over and then walk through it. We added in this information that would pull a random value 1 through 6 and then use that random value to play one of those 5 sounds using audio source.playClip at point, passing in the sound to play, and then finding the AR camera in the scene and playing it at that location. And I'm going to save this because we're going to move this code here in a second. When we hit play, we noticed that the players was fairly good, but when we came over and we got the skeleton on screen, that his swing happened much later, and we fixed that using methods being called from our animation. So what we wound up doing is, instead of leaving this code here, we actually moved it, and I'm going to cut it, Command X. And below here, I'm going to make another method, play the attack sound, and that's where we wound up putting that information. grabs a random value, then plays one of those 5 audio clips again at any time, pause, type in the code, and then continue on. So what we did was we went over to both the skeleton and the shield and warrior, and we worked with their animations. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find skeleton attack. Now skeleton attack I had to work with in the inspector because it's a different type of animation. I opened up events and I opened up that little window there, and that allows me to kind of scrub through here and see where I want to start that sound playing. I think for me it was 27. So I've got my event, my marker at 27. I'm going to hit plus, and the function I want to call is attack sound, and that will call that attack sound method back on the script that's on this object. Now I need to apply. We had that set up, and then we went and we looked at the animations for the hero, and we found his normal attack 1. That was the one we were using. And with that selected, I went to Window, Animation, Animation, and just like before, I wanted to find out that time where he was coming forward so right about 4. So here I take my timeline, drag it over to 4, same icon as here, and I type in attack sound there as well. And again, on the hero, not as noticeable. But definitely on the skeleton, you can tell that it helps the sound visually match up with what's going on the screen. Now we're going to go in and we're going to do something similar. We're going to do our deal damage, and we started off by working in our audio or object script again. We came down and we made this call right here. We were calling a method that we haven't written yet called deal damage. And it's red because it hasn't been created yet. Not going to require any parameters, but it is going to use up top that other script variable that's holding a reference to the other object's object script. Inside of there, we're going to call take damage, which again we have not written yet. And take damage is going to require that we pass in an integer. We're using random.range, and we were passing in a minimum amount of damage of 10, a maximum amount of damage of 20. So take damage is still red because it does not yet have a method itself. Not going to return anything. And it is going to require that it receive some information in the integer format. So we're going to modify the health. Take away the damage. And then we're going to jump in and check that health. Health is less than or equal to 0. Else is going to be greater than 0. We want two things to happen. If the health is less than or equal to 0, we want to go ahead and set that health to 0. We want to play that death animation. And when we play that death animation, we also want to go ahead and play the death sound at the location of the AR camera. Now, if the health does not go below 0, that means that the player was injured. So we're going to pull a number, random number 1 through 6, and we're going to use that just like we did with the sword swing to play one of the 5 injury sounds. Again, got those off of freesounds.org. And when we play that sound, we will also play the animation Take Damage. Now, at this point, we have set the health to 0. We have modified the health here. The one thing we haven't done before we get out of this method is to write the new health to the canvas itself. So we'll see, this is going to need a little bit of workaround as well, because as soon as the person swings, there's going to be damage done. It's visually not going to look right, but we're calling deal damage. It is sending the amount of damage to the other player. The player is taking that damage, modifying his health, checking to see if that health is below 0, and if it is, deal with the character's death. If it's not less than 0, then there's injury being done, playing a sound, playing an animation as well, and then updating the health. So at this point, let's get both of these guys on stage. Hero attacks. You can see our problem there with the skeleton. He's already taking damage and bouncing back, and the skeleton hasn't even swung yet. So we will fix that as well. So in our code, I'm going to comment out that call to deal damage, and we are going to put that back in the animation, the call to do that back in our animation. So again, I'm going to select skeleton attack, I'm going to go down to my events. And right about there is where the sound's playing, 27. And then maybe right about there at 1 is when I want that damage to be dealt. So up here, I've got the timeline on 1, add the event, deal damage. So that's got the skeleton taken care of. I need to go down and apply that. I'll also find my normal attack 1. I'll need to open up the animation window. So about right there on 9. Same icon. Deal damage. So you see the hero works out pretty well. The skeleton, much more synced up too. So we've got those two synced up now for their attacks and their damage, and we'll continue on here in just a bit. Okay, so just a little bit left to do to get to where we were at the end of class. I'm going to open the object script. I'm going to create another method here. For taking potions, it'll be a public void. It is going to take in a variable called potion name, data type string. It's going to play a sound. It's going to update the health. Going to update the health UI. And then find the potion taken. Set active false so it no longer appears on the screen. So I'm going to save that, and then for each of the potions themselves, I'm going to add that event trigger, pointer down, add a new object. For the skeleton potions, I'll bring in the skeleton. There'll be a potion pressed, and this will need to be the same name here. needs to be the skeleton object. And a skeleton potion 2. And then we'll do the same with the hero potion as well. Add that pointer down. Add in our sword and shield warrior. And then this is hero potion. And this is hero potion 2. And then finally, the last one. Should be hero potion 3. Looks like those work. And those work as well, which is great. We got that code working. And then really the last thing we need is in this scene where we left off was we created an empty game object. We called it Game Manager. We created a canvas for the screen. And in that canvas for the screen, we added a UI image. And that UI image sprite was the Epic Battle sprite that we brought in from Moodle. And that is 871 by 114. So I'm going to select that image. I'm going to bring it up where I can see it. Take my scale down. And we called that title. And then we had our start button. Of course, change our overflow so we can change our size. And then the last thing we did was we created that C# script. This is the last thing we did in class. We applied that to the game manager. And then we actually opened up that script and put in all of the variables we would need, and that's where we kind of ended off in class. We linked to the buttons for both the hero and the skeleton, and you'll notice their buttons. It doesn't understand what that is. That means that's a UI element. And we need to add Unity Engine UI. We also need to link to the title image that's out there. That's that epic battle title. We also need to link to our start button. We're going to link to an audio clip called Fight. Again, here in the game manager, we set up the values for the turns. Hero being 0, skeleton being 1. We're setting player turn to 2. Right now it's nobody's turn because the game hasn't started. And then we will link to both of those scripts, both of the hero and the skeleton script. Object script here, object script here. Let's see if that will compile. Go back into Unity. Looks like it saw it. Yes, there's the scripts. So I'm going to drag that over to my game manager. Go. Had it on there twice, so I can just remove this one. So these are our attack buttons for both our hero and the skeleton. This is the skeleton. This one is the hero. The title image is down in that new canvas we just added. The start button is down in that new canvas we just added. The fight audio clip can be found on Moodle. You can download that. Then our player turn, and then our hero script and our skeleton script. Those are the actual characters themselves. And this is where we left off in class with the title on the screen. Both the skeleton and the character out there and their attacks were in place. And we should see that the skeleton and the player's death plays. And we'll look at the same thing for the player attacking the skeleton. And then in the video that is above the lab, it finishes everything up. This is this is where we got in class. And then the remaining video, this is for our class assignment. And then the lab was to finish it up, and there's a video for that just above the lab assignment in Moodle. So this is the video to get through the class. This is where we're at the end of class. This is what you save. You zip up and turn in for the class assignment. Then the video has already been out there for the lab assignment to finish this up and getting it into a playable state. And watch the videos. Of course, if you have any questions, just let me know.